It began on an unremarkable Tuesday, just past midnight. I was alone in my workshop, fiddling with the old shortwave radio I'd salvaged from a garage sale. Most nights, it was just static, maybe the occasional burst of chatter from ships or weather stations. But that night, something different came through, a rhythm. 3 pulses, a brief pause, then again, 3 pulses. I turned every knob, adjusted every dial, but the pattern stayed. It wasn't a glitch. It felt deliberate, like someone or something on the other side was waiting for a reply. For the next several days, I couldn't think about anything else. The pulses returned every night, always at the same time, 12:03 a.m. They were precise, unchanging, steady as a heartbeat. I recorded them, played them back, slowed them down. I tried running them through software to decode any hidden message. Nothing. Just 3 soft pulses followed by silence. But I could feel the weight of intention behind them, like a tap on the shoulder in a dark room. Then came the light. I was closing up the shed one night when the power went out. All at once, every bulb in the house flickered and died. I stepped out onto the porch and saw it, just above the treetops. A pale blue glow, too large to be a drone, too still to be a helicopter. It hung there, humming gently, casting a shimmering aura over the field. I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching it float. It didn't fly away. It didn't blink. It simply waited. The next morning, I walked into the field where the light had hovered. The air felt off, as if the wind had forgotten how to blow. The grass was bent in strange, circular patterns, not flattened like by a storm, but coiled and woven, spiraling inward. In the center of it all stood my dog, Chester. He stared blankly at the sky, silent and still. When I called to him, he didn't even flinch. I had to carry him home. That night, he barked at the corners of the room. At nothing. I became obsessed. I collected hours of radio noise, scanned every wavelength. At first, it was only the pulse. But then other things crept in, subtle variations, echoes of the same pattern, but warped like it was adapting, responding. I stopped leaving the house. My walls filled with sketches and notes, calculations trying to decode a language that didn't seem to belong to this earth. My fridge stayed empty. The garden wilted. I didn't care. That's when Harold disappeared. He lived just up the road, retired, quiet, always on his porch with a thermos of coffee. One morning, I walked past his house, and something felt wrong. The door was open. His truck was still in the driveway, but Harold was gone. Inside, everything was untouched. The radio was still on in the kitchen. His tools lay where he left them on the workbench, and on the grass near the edge of his yard, his boots, upright, as if he had stepped right out of them and vanished into thin air. No one in town made a fuss. A sheriff's car came by. They put out a notice. But the next day, the sheriff didn't show up for work. People started whispering about strange lights, about static in their radios, about animals that wouldn't stop staring at the sky. Then, something even stranger happened. One night, while lying on my roof with a blanket and a telescope, I noticed it. A star blinked out, just like that. One moment it was there, shining like always, and the next gone. I thought maybe a cloud had passed by, but the sky was clear. Then another one vanished. And another. They weren't moving. They weren't twinkling. They were just disappearing. I felt a pit in my stomach like the sky itself was looking back at me and deciding what not to show. A few days later, I found something unexpected. One of my old recording tapes, something I'd tossed aside, had changed. There were burn marks along the edges, like it had been exposed to extreme heat. On the back, scorched into the plastic, was a shape, a spiral of dots like a constellation. I held it up to the window and scanned the night sky. My breath caught. The stars out there matched the pattern exactly. It wasn't just a message. It was a map. The ground began to hum after that. Not loudly, just low enough to feel in your bones. It was constant, vibrating through the soles of my feet and into my chest. My furniture shook slightly, like a soft tremor that never ended. I stopped hearing birds. The forest went still. It was as if everything had taken a breath and was waiting. That's when I found the line in the woods. The trees had split in a perfect path, maybe 10 feet wide, like a hot knife through butter. No scorch marks, no fallen branches, just an impossibly straight divide leading deeper into the forest. I followed it. It went on for half a mile before I saw it. A structure standing where no structure had ever been. It was smooth, dark with no seams or doors, cold to the touch, and vibrating with the same hum I'd felt in the earth. As I placed my hand against it, the surface shifted beneath my fingers and a section of it slid open without a sound. I stood at the threshold for what felt like hours. Inside was a light that wasn't light, a shape that wasn't shape, sounds that felt like memories. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. I could feel something brushing the edges of my mind, not intruding, not forcing, just asking, welcoming. I stepped in, and then I knew they had always been there, not above us, not beyond us, within us. In every signal, every silence, they had waited, patiently, quietly. And now that I had found the way, now that I had listened, they had opened the door. I was never alone, and I would never be the same again. I expected the darkness to consume me as I stepped inside, but instead, I was met with something else. The air wasn't air. The silence wasn't silence. Every breath I took felt like I was inhaling thought, memory, emotion. I saw no walls, no floor, but I wasn't falling. I was suspended, weightless but anchored, held in place by something I couldn't name. The light had no source. It radiated from everything and nothing, casting no shadows but revealing too much. Patterns moved across surfaces I couldn't see, symbols rearranging themselves in impossible configurations. They didn't speak, but I heard them, not in words, but in impressions, like being handed a dream fully formed. They weren't showing me the future. They were showing me the truth behind the present. The structure pulsed with rhythm, echoing the same 3 beats I had first heard on my radio. Only now, I realized those pulses weren't a signal. They were a kind of heartbeat. This place was alive. Or maybe it was an echo of something that had once lived. A memory left behind in a form I could enter but never understand fully. I wasn't inside it, I was part of it. Time unraveled. Or maybe it stretched. I saw myself reflected not as I was, but as I could have been, hundreds of versions of me, diverging like branches on a tree. In one vision, I lived a quiet life, never touched the radio. In another, I vanished like Harold. In yet another, I never came back. But they kept me anchored. They needed me to see, to know, to carry it back. There was pain too. Not my own, but theirs. An ancient ache, as if they had been waiting too long, reaching across a void that didn't want to be bridged. I felt their loneliness, sharp and aching and vast. It wasn't conquest they wanted. It was contact, connection. And just like that, I was outside again. The forest was still. The door behind me gone. The line of trees had sealed shut, like nothing had ever passed through. My watch said I'd only been gone 15 minutes, but the stars overhead were all wrong. Brighter, closer, or maybe I was different. Back home, things had shifted. The hum beneath the earth had stopped. The radio was silent. The static no longer held rhythm, but I could still feel it, under my skin, behind my eyes, in the spaces between thoughts. The map was burned into my memory now, not just the tape. And my dreams were no longer mine. Others began to feel it too. People I'd never spoken to, cashiers, delivery drivers, the quiet woman down the street, started to say strange things. They had dreams of light, of spirals, of doors and places they didn't belong. Some heard the rhythm in the wind. Some saw the stars blink. And some simply disappeared. No one talks about it openly. There are no news reports. But we know, those of us who've seen, those who feel, something woke up. Or maybe we did. Weeks passed. The rhythm never returned. Not through the radio, not in the sky. But the silence was heavier now, like the world was holding its breath. People started forgetting. Conversations trailed off when I mentioned the pulses. The fields grew back over the spiral paths. Even Chester stopped barking at shadows. But I remembered everything. And then, a few nights ago, just after midnight, my power flickered. Not a full outage, just a stutter like a skipped heartbeat. I didn't panic. I just stood there in the dim light of my kitchen, waiting. The refrigerator hummed. The clock reset to 12:03. And outside, at the edge of the trees, The light returned, no brighter than a candle at first, flickering, pulsing. Once, twice, 3 times, then stillness. I didn't go outside. Not yet. I know now that it wasn't about finding them. It never was. It was about opening a door I didn't realize had always been part of me. Something left open. Something that can't be closed. They don't need to speak. They never did. Because now, I'm listening. And I think I've started to understand what they've been waiting for. It wasn't contact. It was an answer. And somewhere deep in the forest, beneath the roots and the static and the silence, I think the question is still echoing, waiting for someone else to hear it.